Breaking news this morning, federal agents have arrested former CNN host Don Lemon after he entered a church to cover an anti-ICE protest on January 18th.
Now, Lemon's attorney, Abby Lowell, released a statement on Instagram, writing in part, quote, "Instead of investigating the federal agents who killed two peaceful Minnesota protesters, the Trump Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest, and that is the real indictment of wrongdoing in this case. This unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from many of the crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court."
The Trump administration had initially sought to charge Lemon and 7 others, but a magistrate judge only approved 3 of those and rejected evidence against Lemon. It is not clear what charges Lemon currently faces. Last week, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the various arrests and wrote on X, "Listen loud and clear. We do not tolerate attacks on places of worship." So initially, after that magistrate judge rejected the attempt to bring emergency charges against Don Lemon, they appealed to a higher court, a federal court of appeals, which I think also did not allow them to have an emergency issuance of charges or issuance of a warrant. But they did find the evidence against Don Lemon for violating the FACE Act credible. So I suspect the DOJ, the reason it took longer to arrest him was because they weren't able to get that emergency order, but that didn't mean necessarily that there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. So now he's been arrested. I think it's the right move. We obviously talked about this issue back when it happened. It's pretty clear in the FACE Act that you cannot impede others' right to worship. He was embedded with and organizing with this group. He was not just following them around with a camera. In some videos, he can be heard chanting along with the protesters. He deliberately interrupted the pastor to interview him while his interview was basically him just defending the protesters interrupting this church service. And so to me, he was an active participant, and that went beyond journalism, and he became a protester and obstructed those parishioners' right to be there worshiping God.
I mean, I completely disagree. I think this is an obstruction of the First Amendment. Don Lemon was actually there documenting the experience. As you've seen Don Lemon as an independent journalist in recent months since he left CNN, he's been out and putting himself in the center of whatever is happening, the most pressing news of the day. And so he was following an organization that he understood where they were gathering and followed them all the way to the church for what he says his account. I guess we'll see how this plays out in court, but he says he was following and documenting. And as people that understand and what journalism is all about, there's somebody who is a leader of a church who's giving a sermon probably about acceptance if it's a Christian church, because that's what the Bible teaches us, to accept people that are different than us. And so the fact that he's also preaching that, but then also running a local ICE chapter, people had questions about what his incentives are. That's a natural question that a journalist would ask. So Don Lemon asking those questions to me is not illegal. Don Lemon following a group of protesters to me is not illegal. And he didn't disrupt the worship by explaining what he's seeing protesters doing. I actually watched the live feed and he was breaking down, like, if you'll see around me, look at this. I'm explaining like a journalist does. And I think now, especially in today's society where we have tons of citizen journalists, because we allow people to take their cameras and tell us what's going on. We don't only accept what the major media outlets, the mainstream media outlets are telling us, that Don Lemon was there trying to figure out what's happening in Minneapolis. There's a lot of people who are trying to figure out what's happening in Minneapolis. I mean, in 1 month, 2 people were killed. And at the same time, we've gotten multiple incorrect statements from the federal government. We've gotten people that have quit the investigation because they were trying to figure out more and get some more dirt on Renee Good's wife and trying to prosecute her instead of looking at if it was a lawful killing of Renee Good. So this whole thing is being handled sloppily. So you would think more journalists would be there telling us exactly what's happening on the ground. And so I think that them putting Don Lemon in custody is ridiculous, and hopefully he gets out soon, because I think that once it starts happening, it really becomes this vendetta situation where President Trump doesn't like you. We don't live in an authoritarian state. So, President Trump has this track record of he doesn't like you and that he comes after you, and he's proven that. And Don Lemon was even fearful of that because he went online and said, listen, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue this crusade against me, and here we are. I think this is embarrassing for our country.
I mean, he was on camera before the group went into the church, before they even got there, and winking to the camera about this operation that they were about to do. So he knew exactly what they were doing. He helped them plan this and do it with them. He was not just following along as a cameraman. He inserted himself as a protester. In my opinion, I don't think this is a personal vendetta at all. I think this is actually trying to protect these people who have a right to worship. I mean, the protesters' First Amendment right does not trump the First Amendment right to religious practice, right? That's the fundamental tension here, and that's why the FACE Act covers places of religious worship, because you have to have both of those rights protected at the same time. My right to scream doesn't trump that person's right to listen to their pastor give a sermon. And I'm curious, on this Bible point you made about how, well, the Bible preaches tolerance and acceptance, so we can't enforce immigration policy. Is that the argument?
No, I think if you're supporting the administration and specifically working for ICE, President Trump has said some really damning things about specifically Somali people that makes you look at immigrants like they're lesser than. We call people illegal when humans actually can't be illegal. That's a policy
legal
thing.
Term. Illegal alien.
Yeah, but it's a policy. I know, but illegal would be the actual thing that they're doing. People aren't illegal. So the thing that they're doing is illegal, which would be crossing the border. And so this is the way that we're describing human beings, right? And humanity tells us that we don't treat people like that, especially if you're reading the Bible. And so that would be a natural question, right? That you would say, okay, so how do you justify this and this? Does it make sense? Connect the dot. That's a question to ask a pastor and also a leader of ICE. I don't think that that's a bad point to make, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Don Lemon is covering what's happening and asking a question. And as a journalist, you could like his question or not like his question, but he's allowed to ask these questions because people at home were asking these questions. Wait, the pastor is also preaching the word of what? What is he saying when he's running the ICE locally and knows that 2 people were killed and people feel unsafe and uncomfortable in Minnesota? And there needs to be federal government attention to the fact that the local government is iced out of this, and no pun intended, investigation. And people don't trust that this is going to be a fair and flawless investigation to tell us what the truth is. They're concerned with Don Lemon. And I think that that's problematic and a huge indication of where the priorities of this administration are, which are not in the right place.
The Bible also tells people to follow the law.
Exactly.
Okay.
But exactly. Don Lemon's allowed to ask those questions, is my point. He's allowed to ask about both of those questions. So how do you justify one over the other?
What I'm getting at is that you're saying that the Bible, this guy's basically a hypocrite, right? That's your argument. He's a hypocrite because he's a Christian and he's a pastor, and the Bible preaches tolerance and acceptance, which the Bible teaches a lot more than just tolerance and acceptance. I think we could agree.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So
it also teaches follow the law, but it doesn't. Right. It doesn't teach you to treat people inhumanely who don't follow the law.
Who is this pastor treating?
It's not. It's about the ICE interactions. 2 people died, and we're trying to make them. They're killed. They're not like their actions.
Did this pastor kill them?
No, but But are you championing what ICE has done? That's the question at hand. Is he championing what ICE has done in his community? Does he think this is the right way forward? Does he think that they were overly aggressive in killing Renee Good? Does he think these are questions that you could ask? I mean, you support ICE. Justify this. Are you on the side of Kristi Noem, who's going to call them a domestic terrorist? I mean, that's what your leader is telling you. That's the appropriate term. She's running ICE, right? Do you align with that? These are regular journalist questions.
Not while the guy's preaching a sermon.
I'm just telling you, Don Lemon shouldn't go to jail for that. I don't think that is absurd. He was literally documenting and telling us what's going on and asking questions like journalists should. I don't think that he should be behind bars in any way. I think this is frivolous, and hopefully his lawyer gets it thrown out. That's my perspective. President Trump raised some eyebrows with his comments about housing during his cabinet meeting. We'll dive into that next. Stick around.